Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Sonic Movie 3 action figure review. And so far, I'm actually pretty impressed with them. And we'll get into that. There are a couple issues as well, but overall, I think these are really good figs. Now, let's move everybody but Sonic. We're going to start, first of all, by just talking about how the figure looks. It's going to be hard to do one-handed. I do not have a tripod. But Sonic looks pretty good, honestly. I mean, aside from these bits on his back, which aren't present on any of the other Sonic Movie 3 figs, I assume it's from the light-up version, and they used the same head mold for both. But they didn't do that for Shadow. Or Super Sonic doesn't have the issue either, even though he also had a light-up version. So, I don't know. Kind of a weird choice. But, I mean, aesthetically, he is very good. Another thing I want to point out is the eyes. We'll get into these here in a sec a little more. Oh, lost focus. Hold up. We'll get into that a little more in a second, but they don't look bad on the figure, for sure. It's just a weird choice. But, first of all, let's talk about what makes this figure good. It's again going to be hard to show one-handed, but his articulation is amazing. So, first of all, his head can move decently well, but it is a Sonic figure, so it's not much they can do about that. The other kind of underwhelming part of his articulation is this. It's a swivel, but it doesn't crunch, really. I mean, it can go backwards, which can be doing, like, you know, you can get a little cool pose out of that. But I would have liked it to crunch forward a little more. But when it comes to his arms, yeah, it's really good. You can get it all the way up, all the way down. Well, maybe not all the way down, because he has actually a few issues with that. There's no way to finagle it all the way down because of the way his bicep is molded. It's kind of like a cone, and it like prohibits him from going all the way down a little bit. But the butterfly joint goes out nicely, and you can actually get him to cross his arms pretty easily. The one also weird thing is you don't really see many figures do the movable fingers. And to be honest with you, I might have preferred just a different set of hands over it. But it's still pretty good. His hands have ball joints, and they work pretty decent. His legs are really good, though. And that's the part I think is the most important for a Sonic fig. You can do splits this way. You can do splits that way with no issues, right? We'll get into this again later. But when it comes to his leg articulation, it's really good. And then you have the fact that his foot is articulated, which is something I really love on a Sonic figure. You can just get him in so many more poses, like a better running pose with his foot all the way up. A kicking pose, like how he does in Smash Brothers. You know, he goes in like this. Or if you're trying to do a very stylized pose, you know, which this figure can do a lot more efficiently than other Sonics, because other Sonic figs cannot do any stylized poses. Really. Of course, I'm not doing a good job of showcasing a stylized pose, but you get what I'm trying to say. So, his articulation is really good. But the issue is, he's the best articulated of the four main figures we're going to talk about today. And even he has some kinks, right? But overall, he's the best Sonic figure, in my opinion, ever made. My only gripe is it's the movie version and not the game version. But I still like the movie version. Ouch. So I guess we should talk about Shadow next. He is the most similar to Sonic when it comes to his articulation. However, his articulation is actually worse, which is sad. He actually somehow has less crunch than Sonic in every way. His arms is a lot better, though. Oh. His head is also a lot better than Sonic. You can get him to look down really good. You can get him to look up really good. This is actually the second version of Shadow. Whoops. But they're both the exact same, in ways that I don't like. Because the main issue with Shadow is his legs. They could have just copied Sonic's, but yeah, he cannot really get his legs in a good position without a lot of finagling. And even then, it's nowhere near as good as Sonic. Right? Even trying to do a sideways something is nowhere as good as Sonic. To be fair, though, I will be frank, you don't need to get Shadow in as many crazy poses as Sonic. It's just kind of silly that they, didn't use the same legs. Because really, all that should have been different was his shoes, which are a separate piece regardless. So it's like, why are they different? And he's a lot harder to understand, but that's just probably because of his shoes. So, yeah, overall, Shadow is kind of a worse figure in ways that were probably shouldn't have been issues. Supersonic, we're going to go ahead and bring him up. He's the exact same as Sonic. In every way, he doesn't really, well, he does have one thing Sonic doesn't have. His fists here, or his hand. I'll bring Sonic back up so you can see it. Well, you can actually get these to move for Sonic, so you can get him to do that, or he could have it bend down, you know. Sonic's, or at least Supersonic, I can't get his wrist, or his ball joint on his wrist to bend at all. And it might just be a really tight ball peg, because you can see it's a ball peg. You can see the joint. It just doesn't want to move. Aside from that, he's the exact same as the other Sonic. He's just, his hands don't move as well. So overall, I'd still say this is probably the best figure. There are two other characters. And the first things first, why did they go for this design for Eggman? Not that I don't like his Sonic 2 outfit. It's just, you know, it's a Sonic 3 wave. It's based on Sonic 3. And I don't think they're making another Eggman in the line. They're making Gerald Robotnik. But they're not making another Eggman. So it's a shame that we didn't get the Sonic Movie 3 design from the movie, because I really liked that design. And he actually has pretty decent articulation on it. Like, all things considered. He's nowhere near as articulated as Sonic, though, but he's Eggman. He doesn't really need to be. It also sucks because he's the one character who doesn't have movable hands, yet his hands are stuck in very awkward positions. I mean, like, what is he, Spider-Man? Whoosh. Spider egg does whatever a spider does. Like, I don't know, it's just weird. I get that he's using his tech glove, which you can't really see very well on this hand, but they actually, you just can't really see it very well. They didn't really model it out good. You can see it on right here, though. But still, it's like, He's kind of limited with what he can do because of his hands, but at the same time, he's a really cool and good-looking fig. Now, for Tails, Tails is actually a pretty decent figure, too. He's the tightest joints, and I feel like I'm going to break them every time I move certain joints, especially the arm ones. They're so thin. But the thing about him is articulation, like, he has 0 articulation right here, unlike Sonic and Shadow. His legs and arms are also, well, he does have the butterfly joint, but it's nowhere near, like, he just can't move as well because of how fat his torso is. Same for his legs. He can't move his legs very well because of how fat the torso piece is. But the thing about this guy is his tails. They are completely articulated. And I really like that. So now we went over the articulation. Let's talk about a couple of things that, some other thoughts. So, they look good. But first things first is... let me get him to stand first. In comparison to... regular Sonic figures, he's a little too tall. And I'd even argue that the movie one should be a little smaller than the game one. But you can see he's a little too tall for most of your Sonic figures. There are some exceptions, and we'll get into that. I'm not going to be able to get this guy to stand up. But if he were to stand up, that's about how they would compare. He's a good inch taller than the regular Sonic figures. And that includes the other Sonic movie figures, which they are a big step up. The eyes, I think for the movie figure, I actually think it works perfectly. But for the game designs, I think I would prefer the paint on eyes. I don't know, maybe it'll look better, I never know. And I brought Mario just to compare these eyes, really. Because they both try to do a very similar aesthetic. And again, I think this looks good on Movie Mario a little bit, but the issue with Movie Mario is his eyes follow you, which is the main reason I bought him, but it leaves an issue with, posing him, because he's never going to look at what you're posing him to be doing, or whatever, unless you actually posed him in a way that makes it to where he's looking at you. He is kind of, his eyes make it hard to pose him, unless you really just don't care about that. I will say, though, I love how they look together. Mario's a little short in comparison, but, that doesn't really matter too much. They look great together. Like two best buddies from different series. I will say, though, I think these blow the 4-inch figures out of the water, which were before this, my favorite Sonic figures. Maybe you could argue the Nendoroid was up there. I like the Sonic Nendoroid. And I'm just going to say it, I don't care if they cancel the 4-inch line or not. I do, going forward, want this to be kind of normal. I do want to say while we're here is, I would love if Jack specific would do characters like from the old, I'd love a cartoon Robotnik from The Adventures of Sonic. I know he wouldn't have good articulation because of his just design in general, but I would just love that. He's just, I don't know, I really like that version of Eggman. I hope that happens eventually. I'd also love to see more IDW stuff. The only one they did was Metal Virus Sonic, which I have, but I'd have to go grab it. Ask her up. So he's not necessarily a good-looking figure, but it is cool to get IDW comic Sonic, but I would love to get characters like Tangle and Whisper, maybe what's her name? Surge. I wouldn't mind Surge. This was just a weird choice. Even like for Metal Virus, like I guess they wanted to do a variant of Sonic, just to see how well a comic character would sell or whatever. But buddy, he looked ugly. It's just a bad design. I bought it because I love the IDW comics though, so I don't know. But like a kid ain't gonna probably buy this over another Sonic for sure. Like he's definitely not top tier. You need this figure. But yeah, if they could do more IDW, maybe some classic Robotnik, I'd be happy. So honestly, I would love if the rest of the Sonic figures, like, were in this design, like the video game figures, all that. Yeah, they could still continue a 4-inch line, but maybe pivot into a new line after this, like a new 5-inch line, because these look pretty good. He's refusing to stand right now, Dan. Okay, we finagled him successfully. Here's another comparison with the Prime Sonic, and honestly, I do like the way Prime Sonic looks. He's probably one of my favorites before this one. I just didn't like his height as well. And again, his articulation's nowhere near as good, right? I think this guy was a real big step up. Because again, like this guy had a hard time crossing his arms, whereas that's not even an issue here. Because of the butterfly joints, this guy doesn't have, and this one does. Like, he just has that movement. His legs also just don't go as high. I do like this hand shape better if you're trying to go for a certain pose. The hand shape is better, and that's what it's saying. Like, I'd love a pointing hand or a hand like this, and just have interchangeable hands rather than like posable fingers. Here he is next to the only 5-inch Amy that I own. I do like this figure though. I like the roboticized Amy look. And here he is next to so you could argue he's a little too tall, and I think the best way to show that, here let's back up so you can see a little better, is I think putting him next to Goku. In my opinion, Goku is a pretty average height for a figure. I mean, he might look alright next to a slightly taller figure, like Iron Man, who is a little taller than both of them. But Iron Man's meant to be a slightly taller person. Like, Goku is about average, I'd say. Iron Man, a lot of these comic book characters are meant to be a lot taller and bulkier than other characters. I'm not sure about. So I wouldn't mind Iron Man being a little taller, just because that's how I feel like most comic book characters would be portrayed, slightly taller than others. Got to back them up even more. Despite the despite the size issue, I still think he looked amazing next to a lot of these other characters. Because he can actually pose with them a lot better. Superman's just way too tall, because the McFarlane toys, I don't like their figures too much. I did like this Superman a little bit. He's just way too tall in comparison to everybody else, though. As you can see. One thing is, I liked that... Hold up. One second. he was pretty in scale with. They like those. The other Sonic was pretty in scale with the Nindroid characters. No, I thought that was a lot better scale. Oh, shit. With figures like this. And again, it's just a lot better scale with characters like Goku, but it's fine. I think we can ignore the scale being a little off. Yeah, since it's a lot better figure. Maybe they just couldn't do that good of articulation in this size. But that's the end of the review. So, yeah, I think that these are, again, I want them to continue making Sonic figures like this. I'm not sure if I want them to continue with eyes or not. I think it's pretty good. But y'all tell me. Do y'all think so? Or do you prefer the 4-inch line? Because of the scale. It's a lot better scale. Personally, I think I can put the scale aside because it's a better figure, and I love articulation. So, this might be a little biased, but A, he does look a lot nicer, but B, I've always been a sucker for scale, okay? Scale is a big thing not scale. I've always been a sucker for articulation. Articulation is huge for me. Articulation is amazing for me. If it's a well-articulated figure, more articulation the better for me. So that's it. Say goodbye.